Okay, I'll just remain quiet.
Hello, and welcome everyone to Overtime. Well, not sorry, the rundown where I'm still shooting graphics over. Thank you for joining us. We've heard that there's been a lot of news regarding countries getting hardware to let's see if I'm going to turn off the internal camera for a minute there. That may help with some of the stream lag. I do apologize for that. So,
you're really garbled.
All right. Well, hold on a sec. Let's let me see what the all right, is there? Let's see. We are going to need to mute you because there's a lot of, I don't know. It looks like people may not be able to hear me. Can you hear me all right or no?
I can hear you, but it sounds like you're gargling.
All right.
Well, my video is also locked up.
Yep, I had to switch up. Give me 1 second.
Sure. I'm going to disengage this thing. I just don't think it's going to work right now.
All right. Does that sound any better?
Oh, much better. Much better.
All right. So we will do that. I have no idea what caused the failure on that mic there, but we're using the other one. Apologies for that, and thank you all for joining us. So. And then your camera's frozen. I will work on that in a second. I also had to shut off the internal camera, so you're just getting a black screen. Oh no, you're probably getting you're getting the color bars. It's probably what you're getting. So
no, I see a frozen picture of myself.
Oh well, the handsome devil on the screen. Well, thank you all for joining us. So over the last 24 hours, we've been getting increasing news of a significant amount of hardware going to Ukraine. We're trying to figure out sort of how much hardware, what kind of hardware, and what we're looking at. It started with the tanks. Germany. I don't think it officially held up the Abrams tanks going to Ukraine, but sorry, not Abrams, Leopard, the Leopard 2s. The Leopard 2s, in order to send them to Ukraine, you have to get Germany's permission, even if you own the tanks. That's part of the deal when they sell you the tanks is you have to get permission from Germany if you're going to move the tanks out of the country or sell them or give them away to another country. Yeah, I'm going to need to, let me... I'm gonna mute you, so you are now muted on my end, and I can unmute you in a minute. But we're getting a lot of background noise there. So the deal is that they can you need their permission, and the suggestion was that they were not going to provide this permission. We learned, I think it was 2 days ago, that in fact they would not interfere with other countries that wanted to do it, specifically Poland, that was talking about sending its tanks to Ukraine, and then to boot, Germany is going to send a number of tanks to Ukraine. Vladimir Putin has said that he will punish Ukraine if they accept any tanks from Germany or from any other countries. He hasn't specifically said he's going to punish the countries sending them, and now the U.S. is going to be sending Abrams tanks. So the question is this really as much of a game changer as it sounds like? What do we, a lot of people, and we've heard game changer before in Ukraine, we hear it a lot. Oh, the Patriot system is going to be a game changer, or the HIMARS are a game changer, and they've all been very, very important, but game changer is a word we try not to toss around lightly. So we've been trying to figure this out before just going live with this. So we have Commander McMillan with us to deconstruct some of this information. Commander, how are you?
I'm doing great.
That's good. Thank you so much for joining us. So what do you know about these transfers?
Well, right now we have confirmed a total of 42 tanks from various European countries. specifically from Poland, Germany, and the United Kingdom. Each of them has basically promised 14 tanks. The British are sending Challengers. The Poles and the Germans are sending Leopard 2s. The U.S. has also announced 31 Abrams are going to Ukraine. Now, people will ask, what's the significance? We keep seeing the number 14 appearing in these transfers. 14 tanks, essentially, by standard NATO doctrine, would amount to a company of tanks. And 31, that's basically 2 companies with a headquarters element for a battalion.
All right. So at present, that's about 40 some odd tanks. Is you there? All right. We did lose that connection for a minute. I'm not sure if that was our end or his. We're having some issues. So in general, it's not necessarily a bad idea to say it was our end. And let's see. And it looks like he's talking, but I don't. Oh, there he is. We got you back.
If you unmuted me.
Well,
oh my God.
It was no, the stream just froze in. But who's that?
That's one of the 3 dogs deciding that Daddy's not getting enough attention.
Oh,
sorry. So, to reiterate, I don't know where I cut out, but basically there's a total of 73 tanks that have been officially announced as they are en route to Ukraine. And that's including 31 American Abrams.
Why are these tanks so important?
They are a major step in terms of upgrade over the T-72 tanks that the Ukrainians have been using. How much? Sorry about that. How much of the upgrade is open to interpretation? I've heard some people say that, you know, the Abrams is 10 times as effective as the T-72, and that's an interesting number, and that may be the case. But I think there are other factors that have to be weighed in. It's, you know, crew training, doctrine, terrain, what the mission is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So giving that kind of a ratio number, I think, is very deceptive and confusing to people who don't really know the details of what's being talked about. The key is that these are a significant improvement in the tanks that Ukraine will be operating with once they have them.
All right. So
the improvement basically boils down to they have longer range guns. They have a much better first shot to hit chance because they have much better fire control on onboard computers and such. And taken together in a tank-on-tank engagement, those are huge advantages. Does that mean you can't destroy any of these tanks with the T-72? Yeah, you can. But, you know, how many T-72s the Russians have left to throw at the problem?
Well, and so my understanding is that most of these tanks can actually take, in most cases, 1 or even 2 direct hits from a T-72, at least on the front armor, before the armor is penetrated. Most of these can go through 1 or even 2 T-72s at a time on a single shot, is my understanding, and it vaporizes the way the ammunition goes through the tank. It tends to kill everybody on board. And then there's the stabilization. So the stabilization, as I understand, it's important too, because most of the Russian tanks have to stop in order to fire. These do not. Is that correct?
That's correct. all the models of tanks that are being talked about here for transfer to Ukraine are tanks that can fire on the move. The T-72 and definitely the T-80 and T-90s is nowhere near as good.
Now, part of that is the gun stabilization, right? So that you can be going over rough terrain, but the gun can maintain a track on its target. We have an image. We have a video here of the famous beer test. So let me see if I can turn your camera back on for you, and hopefully we're not going to have an issue with that.
You don't need to. I mean, I'm familiar with it.
It's very short. We'll play that again in a minute. But essentially, what's happening is they take a beer, pour a beer, put it on the front of the gun, and then just drive over rough terrain, and the beer isn't that's the stabilization, right?
Yeah, they don't spill a drop. So that means point the gun at the target. You can hit the target with that thing
over just about any kind of terrain.
Yeah.
Now, when do they think they are going to get these, if you know, and when are they actually going to be useful?
The key, I think, is getting crews who know how to use these tanks, because clearly there's a difference between a crew who used to be driving a T-72 getting in this and using it to full effect, and a crew that spends a couple months training and familiarizing themselves with all the systems that are on these new tanks so that they can become proficient in using them. So I think at a minimum, we're looking at months. When do they arrive? I'm not terribly sure. I do know that there have been, in preparation for this, because everybody anticipated these transfers were going to start, there have been Ukrainian tank crews training in various European countries for taking control of these vehicles once they're approved for transfer. So they may see some number of them, a limited number, actually getting to the front in fairly short order. So a week or two, but I think the bulk of all these tanks are probably going to take several months. And by sheer coincidence, several months corresponds to the April-May timeframe when everybody usually calculates the ground will be in good enough condition to support major mechanized operations.
So what interesting coincidence.
Totally coincidental.
Yeah. So is a two-part question here. Is this a game? Well, I'll break it up. Is this a game changer in terms of the war in Ukraine?
I have come to loathe that phrase because it's so overused.
Yeah.
It will make a difference. Let's leave it at that. It is not a game changer. I don't know what would constitute a game changer here, short of, direct NATO intervention or something of that level, or the Russians deciding that they're going to start suddenly employing tactical nukes. That would be a game changer. So are these tanks a game changer? Definitely not. But they will make a significant difference if they are used correctly. And I think the key there is that if you get these better tanks and you drab disperse them across the entire front, it's not going to do much good. You'll get slightly better defenses in one sector where the tank happens to be. And I hate to use analogies, but this is analogous to the situation that the French put up with in World War II when they were invaded and fell in 6 weeks. Most people don't realize the French actually had more, and technically speaking, better quality tanks than the Germans at the time, but they didn't employ them properly. They dispersed them across the front in exactly the manner I'm talking about. So if you want to have good effect, you concentrate all your best forces in one area, and that's where you launch your decisive attack.
I assume, given what we've seen of Ukraine, they probably have a specific area already in mind, and
oh yeah,
yeah. All right. So I think, yeah.
I'm not going to speculate where that is. Somebody did mention in one of the discussion boards on Discord today that could it be that the Ukrainians are using the current fighting in the Bakhmut area, the center of the front lines, as a way to draw more and more Russian forces in, so that when they launch their attack, wherever it is in the coming months, that attack will fall on a sector of the front where it's not well defended. And that's very similar to what they did when they took that huge swath of territory up near Kharkiv. Mm-hmm. They had drawn the Russians into this big battle of attrition, and the Russians had dutifully said, oh yeah, we'll play this game. We've got a lot more troops and people than you do. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, the attack up near Kharkiv hit, and there was a huge advance and massive loss of equipment and personnel by the Russians. So it, I think, is quite possible. That's reason they're playing out this bloody battle of attrition in the center, is that it's something that the Russians are going to make the same goof on, they're hoping.
Putin has said he's going to retaliate against Ukraine for this. Any thoughts as to if that's even possible at this point?
Can he do to retaliate short of WMD? I mean, seriously, there's this myth that the Russians seem to want to perpetuate, and their backers want to perpetuate, is that, you know, Russia's fighting this war with one hand tied behind its back, that all their very best quality troops and equipment have been saved in case of NATO doing something. And that's BS. The raw truth is they have committed all their best forces, and they're decimated. And most of the stuff that's at the front now are these hastily mobilized reservists, conscripts, people that Wagner has, dredged out of the prison system. And we're seeing how ineffective they are. Sure, you can take a little village. Look at the number of people that they were willing to kill, their own people to kill, to get that village. That's a non-sustainable war. But they're doing it because they can't come up with anything better. So if they're going to retaliate, honestly, the only card they have left to play is WMD. And I think they're fully aware of the fact that doing that, whether it be massive use of chemicals or massive use of nuclear weapons inside Ukraine, I'm not talking about a giant strategic exchange, but dropping a number of tactical nukes, that's going to generate a NATO response. And I don't mean a NATO response in terms of we are very angry, wagging our finger in the air. I mean something much more decisive.
We have a $1.99 super chat. Thank you, Daedalus Media. We appreciate your support. Thank you so much, $1.99. Short of nukes, Putin is short on options. It sounds like that's what you're saying. He's already thrown everything he can at it, and he's emptying his own prisons to try to find more, and scraping the bottom of the barrel, it turns out, hasn't been all that helpful to him so far.
Crafty bastard read my book.
So,
line from the movie Patton.
Oh, that, yeah, okay. I should have picked up on that. Now, what does this, in your mind, signify anything about the U.S. commitment and the commitment of other countries? Is it stronger than anticipated? Has it just recently become stronger? Is this just a show, or do you think that this is part of either a deepening commitment or at least an ongoing commitment to Ukraine in this case?
It's an ongoing commitment. It's really hard to say all the issues, the ramifications for what's going on. Zelensky said he needed 300 tanks, Western tanks, if they were going to be able to expel the Russians from Ukrainian territory. And if you add together all the numbers of those that have been confirmed as being transferred, 73 right now from Poland, Germany, the UK, and the US, another 50 promised by various European states, unspecified numbers promised by the Swedes. And the Spanish at one point did promise about 40 of their Leopard 2s, but then kind of withdrew the offer because they said their Leopard 2s are in a quote, deplorable, unquote, state. So they would need to go and send them back to the factory for major rework before they'd be able to be sent to Ukraine. So even if you add all that together, you're still probably no more than halfway to the total that has been requested.
So Titan has a question. Let's see. He had asked previously, and I remember this, we've discussed this on several occasions, tantalizing discussion, about the possibility of Russia going past the border of Ukraine going past the border with Russia. And you had suggested that there was, at a minimum, a logistics problem with that perhaps if they had long enough artillery they could fire into Russia, but actually going into Russia is much harder because of logistics issues. Do these tanks change that calculus in any way?
Not terribly, and in some cases, I would say that the Abrams actually worsens the logistics situation because it is a notorious fuel guzzler. I think that may have been one of the reasons we were trying to hold off on having to send them any Abrams and try to convince the Europeans to send them Leopards, because it's easier to keep those operational. They're all diesel powered. They're not as huge gas guzzlers. To be optimally employed, the Abrams really needs to be given basically jet fuel. And you don't calculate the mileage from the Abrams in miles per gallon. You calculate it in gallons per mile.
Oh, Jesus. Do you happen to know how many gallons in a tank on that thing? Or let me rephrase that. Do you know what the range is before it has to refuel?
I recall reading somewhere it was something like 170 miles or something. But right. I do know when we were doing the logistics planning for Operation Iraqi Freedom, it was basically for every M1 company you sent forward, you had to send 2 fuel trucks with it.
All right, so that's that sounds like that's going to cause a fine sports car. It's not a sports engine; it's a jet engine. Is that? I think that's what you had said previously.
Oh yeah, no, it is. It's a gas turbine engine. It's not a diesel like the Leopard has. It's literally a gas turbine, which is basically a jet engine, and so it's difficult to maintain. The engine periodically needs replacement because the blades in the jet engine kind of get worn. It's designed for quick replacement, and we have the logistic capability and the maintenance infrastructure behind that. And I don't mean back at the factory, but field logistics and maintenance stuff that we can do to keep it running. The question is, would the Ukrainians have that same level of logistics and maintenance capability to keep it functional?
Yeah, that sounds like that would be an added challenge.
Yeah, right. I think the best way to look at it is if the Leopard 2s, particularly the later models, the A6s and A7s, if those are fancy sports cars, arguably the M1 is a Formula One.
All right. So, and they are getting now a was it 30 of those?
Yeah. Today in his speech, Biden confirmed the number 31. There has been speculation that the transfer may include upwards of 100 eventually, but right now the only thing that has been confirmed is that 31.
All right. What we're going to do is we're going to show that footage again because I think that's really spectacular footage. And then I think we're going to take we got one or two more questions, and then I think we'll try to take a look at the big picture here, and then I think we'll wrap it up. So this once again is they've placed just a little table on the end of a gun on a. I'm gonna mute you real quick. All right. They placed a table on the end of the gun on a Leopard 2, I believe this is, and this is to show off the stabilization of the gun, where the gun can track a target and doesn't move despite the heavy terrain that the Leopard can go over. This is important to be able to strike targets while moving, which is one of the unique things that these vehicles can do. So without further ado, the beer test. I'll unmute you. All right, so, and I'll unmute you in a second here. Let me clear that. And we also have another super chat real quick. Gaming with Robin, 11 pounds. Question, assuming the, for the moment, an optimum outcome for Ukraine. They managed to chase off the Russians from Ukrainian soil, but the Russians keep sending missiles from Russia. What do we do then? I think that's an excellent question, Commander. Any thoughts?
Yeah, and the answer is we scratch our heads and look very confused. The only way to solve that problem is if, you end up sending tanks through Moscow, and we don't want to go there. Nobody wants to go there. And that's one of the big problems, the conundrum of this whole war right now, is the war only ends when Russia says it's done.
We have another. Well, no, I'll get to that in a second. So you and I have spoken about this in private, the two of us, because I will tell you, I find the problems here rather galling, and the only answer that anyone seems to be able to come up with rather galling. And I've heard a few people talk about this now publicly. You told us this on day one. On day one, you said that there would end up having to be a negotiated settlement of some kind between the two. Obviously, everybody we've spoken with, even remotely associated with Ukraine, says, nope, ain't going to happen. Starsky has obviously reiterated that position. Zelensky has reiterated that position. The only thing they'll take is Russia leaving and never coming back, which, while I think is ethical and more than fair, isn't practical. And you've said this before, because they can just keep shelling. So the question is, how much for Ukraine's pride and sense of fairness, however just it may be, how much do they want to keep suffering? Because Russia can literally never stop. They can keep throwing rockets for 100 years in there if they want to, killing civilians, killing children. And the question is, what can we do to stop them? And I'm not sure that there's a whole heck of a lot. So you had said at the beginning something negotiated. It looks like something along the lines of what you had even said within the first weeks of this, which is perhaps they say, cede the Donbass and say that region was always kind of, kind of questionable for Ukraine anyway. As long as Ukraine gets Crimea back, then it's a win for them, and Putin can spin that as a win for himself. Does that sound? That was sort of your position back then. Is that still roughly, you think, it, without trying to put words in your mouth?
No, I think that's exactly right. I think that as much as the Ukrainians are absolutely insistent, and I can't say I disagree with them, Russia must get off of their territory, return all the people who've been displaced, pay reparations, and something needs to be done to guarantee their security through the future. The reality is, it's not going to be able to accomplish that as an end of the war if the Russians simply refuse to acknowledge that kicking their troops out of Ukraine ends the war. You have to go to a negotiated settlement. And as with all things, a negotiation is a two-way street. Both sides have to say something and do something to make the other happy. So the real question, I think, becomes, what are the Ukrainians going to do to make the Russians happy in that negotiation? And I don't know. They basically said there's no concessions they're willing to make.
It's been my hope that, and I think I don't think it's practical. It's a long shot. It's been my hope that the only concession they would ever have to do, and that they could get away with this, is just a pledge not to seek NATO, not to join NATO, and if offered, to refuse joining NATO and leave it at that, and they get back Donbass and Crimea. I think that's a pie in the sky wish list, but I that's the only way I can. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is a pie in the sky wish list, because the final point of all this is Ukraine needs security guarantees that the day after you sign whatever agreement it is, Russia doesn't try this nonsense again. And given Russia's history, and I don't just mean in the past, 10, 20 years, I'm talking about going way back. Given Russia's history, it's pretty evident that, they'll continue doing that until somebody forces it. I think NATO membership or something of that nature is almost a prerequisite.
Well, so let's talk about that for 1 second. Other than the previous, say, 300 or 400 years, and all the way up through the Helsinki Accords, where Russia vowed not to invade any part of Ukraine. That was the grounds for which Ukraine gave up its nuclear arsenal. Ukraine was the third largest nuclear power on the planet. They gave up their nuclear weapons with an agreement from Russia not to ever invade and to always respect their territory. Other than those violations, can you name one instance for me where Russia has been untrustworthy?
Oh, let's see.
Well, no, I mean, other than all of the previous 400 years. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Long pause. Oh.
It's that dry wit.
Let's take another case of that, and we'll go in the other direction and say the Crimean War, same area that we're talking about today, which is 1854, and the Russians are doing an aggressive war against the Turks. And, the sick man of Europe, the Ottoman Empire, the French, the British, and the Sardinians, of all people, decide, you know what, this isn't right. And they send troops into Russia. They destroy most of the Russian army. They take Sevastopol. And that becomes the bargaining chip that ends the Russian attacks on Ukraine, or not Ukraine, but in this case, the Ottomans, is they say, okay, we'll give you back the Crimea in return for you leaving the Ottomans the hell alone. And then how long do you have another war in between the Ottomans and the Russians? It takes, until World War I, and then they're at it again.
Yeah, I've always heard from Europeans that they get nervous with Russia as a neighbor, and it was interesting when we last had Starsky on, and we asked him, "Did you anticipate having to go to war when you got older?" When he was a little kid, he goes, "Oh yeah, we knew this would happen." And I'm just like, "Wow, it gives you some." We should talk to him a lot more about just the cultural, what it was like growing up under in the shadow of that giant. First, I'd like to apologize to Gaming with Robin. I keep doing this, which is it's euro. If I don't put on my glasses and look real close, because the monitor's just got really high resolution. I always think it's pounds every time I've seen it. Every time Gaming with Robin has super chatted, I say pounds. So apologies, Gaming with Robin. Thank you again for your support. It was 11 euros. So the two other questions. First, and I don't want to harp on this. It was asked. I think it's a legit question, but we've discussed before the possibility of Ukraine attacking and going into Russia. And again, you and I have had personal discussions on this where I just said, in my view, it's like morally and ethically like the right thing to do. Russia has to pay some cost for this, other than just whatever they're throwing at it. But practically speaking, if they go and hit Russia back on Russian soil in any significant way, they're likely to lose support from NATO and other countries. Yeah. So the question was from Titan again, what would it take for them to be able to have that ability? And I'll hit with a follow-up because I think it's important. Is it likely that even if they had the ability that they would take that kind of risk?
I'll answer the second part first.
Right.
I think going into Russia proper costs Ukraine most of their international support, because that makes them kind of the aggressor. They are now invading Russia as opposed to Russia invading Ukraine. It's kind of the same reason why when we did the first Gulf War.
The first one, yeah.
Yeah, we enjoyed huge popular support. I mean, people who, hated us suddenly became our quasi-allies in liberating poor little Kuwait from Iraqi aggression. And wisely, they decided, we're not going to invade Iraq at this point. We're not going to force regime change, because the moment we do that, this wonderful coalition we've put together, this good feeling that we've generated for ourselves, both domestically and internationally, we're now seeing, America being praised for being the liberators who saved Kuwait. We lose that the moment we start trying to drive on Baghdad. And so, and that's confirmed because you see what happened when we eventually decided that's what we were going to do.
Well, that's not entirely true. We kept Palau. Palau stayed with the U.S.
Oh, well, there you go. But
sorry,
you see what I'm getting.
Yes, I do.
I know it was. Yeah, and so I think that's a very dangerous thing for Ukraine to do, from their perspective. Mm-hmm. If you want to ignore that part of the equation and simply say, what does Ukraine need to do to successfully drive in and force regime change on Russia? I think the biggest thing, this would be the actual game changer that everybody's talking about, is if Ukraine had a large, well-trained, well-equipped Air Force. Command of the skies and being able to project that over Russian territory as a Ukrainian ground force was moving forward would enable that kind of a thing. The logistics can be worked out. You just figure out how to, move stuff by rail or get more trucks or whatever. You can work around that issue. It's problematic, but you can work around it. Air power, you can't.
Now, there was talk, and this was very sort of highly speculative, that the U.S. would send F-16s. I don't think that's ever been on the table, if for no other reason than the 2 years it would take to train people. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. What was that's? Do you think that's on the table anywhere, or?
It's a interesting question. Nobody has said anything about doing it, and the speculation has always been that to train up a decent quality pilot for modern high-tech aircraft takes about a year. Now, here's an interesting thing. Mm-hmm. There have been rumors circulating for some time that mysteriously there are Ukrainian pilots being trained in the U.S. I don't know if it's true. I'm just saying they're rumors that I've heard, and you see a lot of total BS coming out on the internet, and people saying this stuff. But if that's true, you don't bring people in to train them up to be pilots without having some idea of what you're going to be putting them into. Now, F-16 or F-18 is a good question. I don't know. Both have their advantages and disadvantages. It's kind of a situation where I'm less concerned about what aircraft might get transferred than I am about the fact that aircraft are going to be transferred at all. And once that starts happening, then it seriously begins to change the dynamic of what's going on. Since about the second week of the war, the Ukrainians have been able to hold the Russians to what I call air parity. In other words, the Russians have not been able to establish air superiority, let alone air supremacy. It means the Russians have had trouble trying to conduct any kind of deep strikes with their air force. Typically, their aircraft only approach the front line or barely cross it, deliver their ordnance, turn around, and head home at high speed because it's so deadly doing so. The Ukrainian Air Force has been, if you count the numbers, destroyed like 3 times, completely obliterated. And yet it keeps coming back. That is because they have been getting aircraft from the West, but they have not been getting Western aircraft. They've been getting former Warsaw Pact Soviet aircraft from former Warsaw Pact members like Poland, the Czech Republic, and so on. You there?
Yep. Sorry, I wasn't sure if you had cut out or not. No, I think that's a good point about the internet rumors. I'd seen something similar, but I saw this great quote on the internet. It was a quote from Abraham Lincoln that said, "Don't believe everything you see on the internet."
Exactly.
Yeah. So we'll take that with a grain of salt. Well, Commander, thank you very much for your time. I think what I'm hearing, and I think what our sort of takeaway is that this is a very, very good news for Ukraine. It's going to help. It's going to help a great deal. Game changer is not a word that you would use to it, and I've seen no reason to apply that word to this particular circumstance. Is that about the takeaway?
Yeah, as others have pointed out, and I can't remember where I saw it first, but giving them these new tanks isn't a game changer because they already had a bunch of tanks. These are just better tanks. It's the same kind of mentality that Hitler used in World War II, which is, oh no, now we have this super tank. It's so much better than everything else out there. Yeah, but you've only got, a couple dozen of them that you're able to get to the front right now. It isn't going to change the outcome. It's just that one place where those tanks are deployed. Those are more dangerous than the regular tanks. That is the same situation here.
All right. Well, we're going to keep an eye on it on our Discord. So please come on in, and as we learn more about what is going to be sent to Ukraine and when, we're constantly putting up in our Ukraine channel and on occasion on the Breaking channel if it looks like it's important news. Commander, I know you've had a busy day, and I know your day is not over. So I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to join us for the hour. It's been a very big help, and I think you've clarified for our audience a great deal. So thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, and we look forward to seeing you guys. We will be seeing you, Commander, Thursday night, 9:30 p.m. Eastern for our usual hang, and then we will, hopefully with luck, and then we will have Operator Starsky from Ukraine live on Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We look forward to that. Thank you all for joining us, and we hope you have a pleasant evening. Good night, all.